work, sometimes they don't. So that's me. First and foremost, I'm a hacker and a researcher. I do that picture as a joke, because honestly, one of the things I'm most frustrated with in this industry is the fact that certain organizations in particular, certain people still love to kind of further this notion of what a hacker is, right? We're all hiding out with our hoodies in our basements and doing those nasty things we do. I've been a hacker all my life. People ask me, you know, how did you become a hacker? Well, I didn't really become one. I was kind of born one, and I'm guessing that's the same for a lot of those people in the room here. Age of 12, I bought my first computer, and promptly not knowing what I was doing, and I actually read the manual, which was the first mistake, when it tells you the first thing to do is to insert disk 1 and run fdisk, not realizing, of course, everything was already installed. So I learned how to install an operating system and software really early on, and that kind of got me going. I've been there ever since. I talked about myself programming, and nowadays it's my passion. You know, I like to get out, I like to talk to people, and that kind of goes to my second point. I'm also a security evangelist. Now, the term evangelist, I've been searching for a better term, so if someone has something that more accurately conveys what I want to talk about here, please let me know. Security evangelist. That's why I'm standing up here today. Like I said, I've got a passion for this stuff. I have for many, many years. See, that continues. Multi-path distortion is always nice. So really, this is something I get up and do fairly often. I like to share my ideas. I like to have my ideas challenged. I like to hear other people's ideas, and if they're receptive, I like to challenge their ideas too. Sometimes we gotta be a little more careful with that last one because not everybody takes that so well. And then finally, I'm an information security professional. Ooh, what does that mean? It just means I do this for a living. Yeah. So I've been working for a number of different organizations. I started, honestly, in a financial services space, leading their, what we call the security test team. So we did all the pen testing, all the vulnerability scanning, all the vulnerability management. That's always fun. And so, you know, that parlayed into a consultant role where I've been ever since. I've been doing pen testing for years, and then I decided, you know, I made that fun step into this thing we call management. And it's funny how the skills start to go away when you do that. So I will tell you this is probably the least technical talk I'm going to give this year. It is also probably one of the most important in my mind, because we're going to talk today about this thing called FUD. Now that's a term, and I was just asked, and so I looked it up. It goes back a long ways. We can kind of trace it back to 1975, when Gene Amdahl started his own company, Amdahl. He left IBM, and he was talking about, you know, the sales motion of IBM salespeople, what they did to try to dissuade people from buying Amdahl products. Well, we in security know this term real well because we use it a lot. And so I'm going to start off first. As I said, I'm a security professional. I started, you know, as a pen tester, and as I get higher and higher into management, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned how to coach CISOs on how to talk to their boards. I've learned how to work with executives, but it wasn't always that way. So I mentioned I worked for a financial services firm. And so we're going back to, you know, the early 2000s, this would have been. And we did a bake-off. We needed a new vulnerability scanner, and I and my project team put in a whole lot of effort. We went through multiple tools, we rated each one of them, we had our set of requirements, we knew what we were looking for. And at the end of it, I took our final results, I took them to my manager, and I produced this great presentation, and we talked it through, and he loved it. It was great. We were going to get all this new functionality out of this. We were going to be able to discover parts of our network that we didn't know existed because we had just gone through a massive merger. Oh, this was going to be awesome. All right, so I'm fired up. And then my manager looks at me and he says, "You need to pitch this to the executives." Okay. I've never talked to the CEO in my life. I'm, at this point, 20-something years old. Sure, this sounds exciting, right? So the goal was I was going to talk to the CIO, the CEO, and they were also going to have the president of the board. You know, for someone who's a security engineer, who's in her 20s, that's a daunting task. So, you know, I had an awesome presentation. We had all this great material. I knew I was going to go in there and I was just going to rock it. So I was going to take, you know, all that material that I just put together, all the stats, everything else, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to knock it dead. And he says to me, put together a presentation for them. I just gave you a presentation. What do you mean? So it started to dawn on me that something was different. All right, well, they're business leaders, but this is important stuff. They'll get it. They'll work with us on it. Okay. So I put together a presentation. It was new. It was a little different. I pulled in a lot of the stuff that we had done previously, and they set up a meeting. 9 a.m. Tuesday morning, I walk into the boardroom at our corporate headquarters, which at that time was in Jacksonville, Florida. And I sat down and I gave them my message. And what was my message? Well, among a whole lot of other things, it was a lot of fear. These are all the horrible things the hackers are trying to do to us. This is what it's going to cost us. If hackers get in, they're going to destroy us. I added some dose of uncertainty. Yeah, you know, it's so hard to know where they're going to target next because we have so many different systems out there. Some of them we don't even know about. And yeah, it's hard for us to say for sure where they're going to come in, and we think this system will help us. But I wasn't done. I also had to throw some doubt on top, right? I really wanted to scare these guys into doing what I wanted them to do. So I added the doubt. Nobody can defend 100% against attackers. I doubt we're ever going to be truly safe. We've heard that message before, haven't we? We've delivered that message before. It's not untrue. It's completely true. In fact, I now have a shirt that says, unhackable, here, hold my beer. Because I'm tired of seeing vendors talk about, be breach-proof if you buy our software. But the fact of the matter is, when you're talking to those high-level executives, and you're trying to win them over, this message that I put out there, it failed miserably. We did not get the money we wanted for that massive overhaul. Now, I can't say it's related. I can't say that had we gone out and bought the new vulnerability scanner environment that was going to give us all these devices and all these new areas of our network and do all this wonderful discovery and have all these new features and reporting, that it wouldn't have happened. But 6 months later, we were breached. They got in through a system that we didn't know existed. Like I said, we went through a merger. We absorbed a lot of new systems, a lot of new parts of the network that we just simply didn't know existed. And we were breached. Now again, I can't say that had I bought that vulnerability scanner, we would have prevented this. I mean, this happened 6 months later. So, maybe not. But the fact of the matter is, I felt like a failure. I felt like I had an opportunity to do something to improve our environment, to make us safer, and I walked into that meeting and I failed to deliver a message that resonated with the business leaders and failed to capture their attention and motivate them to do something different. So that's what I want to talk to you guys about. How do we get away from this message and move to something better? So, if you read the abstract of this talk, I promised you interactivity. Yeah, here it comes. It's time to get the audience involved. How many of you have children? Good, this is going to work really well. How many of you were a child yourself? Yay! We got them all. There we go. Perfect. So, how many of you have either had the talk with your parents or you've had to talk with your children about saving money? Fewer hands, they're more like, I'll admit it, it's okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I want to encourage my teenager who's getting their first job to take some of that money and put it into savings. So, what I want from you now are ideas. What are things that you can tell a teenager about why they should be saving money?
New video games.
New video games. I like that. What teenager does not like new video games, right? All right, what other ideas do you have out there? What else could you do that might convince a teenager?
You don't know what the future's going to be.
You don't know what the future's going to be. So we're preparing for the future. This is kind of fun, typing one-handed. All right, I heard one over here. Stop paying for you're going to stop paying for their stuff? Okay. I like that. Well, that's cool. We'll fix that in a minute. What else? What other ideas? How else are you going to convince them?
Cars are expensive and you'll want freedom.
Cars are expensive. Any other ideas? What's that? Move away from your parents. Okay, yes. All right. Let's see. How is that coming out? Is it working? Not the best, but we'll see if we switch back. We'll try this. I think we've got it now. So, yeah, that's really cool. I don't know why it's not showing us. There we go. Oh. I love PowerPoint, don't you? There we go. So, we've got a decent set here. You can see kind of the right side and left side. You see what I'm doing here, right? What's that?
Carrot and stick.
Carrot and stick, right? On the left, we've got a bunch of stuff that are threats. We've got all the negative things, all the uncertainty about the future. And on the right, we've got those things like, here's those cool rewards that you can get if you save your money. Now, as you look at these and put your teenager hat on, which one of these is the one that is going to motivate you or feels more exciting to you? Like, oh yeah, that's why I got to save money. Naturally, column B, right? All these exciting things I can go out and get. So, let's talk a little bit more about why that is. A number of years ago, a public health system in New York, a state-run hospital, North Shore University Hospital, for those of you that are familiar with New York, that's out on Long Island, they did a study. As we all know in hospitals, spread of infectious diseases, spread of infections in general is a big issue, right? And one of the most basic ways that everybody in hospitals are taught to help prevent that is simply wash your hands. So each time you go in and you meet with a new patient, before and after you wash your hands. Everybody in the hospital is trained on this. They go through, just like we do security awareness training, they do infection training. They do this over and over again. Everybody in the hospital is trained. They wanted to study how often are people actually compliant with this policy. So the first thing they did was they hung not hidden cameras, they hung surveillance cameras over all the sinks to monitor whether people washed their hands on the way in and on the way out. And the employees were aware of it. It wasn't, these weren't like, cameras in bathrooms and weird things that we really shouldn't do as researchers. They were aware of it. They knew these cameras were there. They knew this study was happening. With the cameras in place and their knowledge and all their training, less than 10% were compliant with the policy. You know you can get fired for this, right, folks? Less than 10%. Wow. So this doesn't bode well. But they decided, okay, how can we motivate them differently? And this is what the study was all about. The next thing they did was they installed displays. These displays were set up to provide a positive message, positive reinforcement back to each person when they wash their hands. This is simple, and it seems almost childish, right? Like I'm going to have a little, LCD display here that says, "Good job, you washed your hands today." That's all they did. You know what happened? It's going to be mind-numbing when you see this. Almost 90% compliance. All that changed was they added those screens that said, "Hey, you did a good job, thanks for washing your hands." It's 80% difference. That's the power of getting away from messages of fear. You're going to get fired if we see you not washing your hands. And instead, we move to a message of something positive. It doesn't have to be spectacular. It's just got to be a reward. So why is this? So this was a neuroscience study. So let's talk to the neuroscientists and find out, right? So what we see, as you've seen displayed here, and indeed this is a concept in neuroscience, is that if I want to discourage action, I want to keep you from running into the lake because you don't know how to swim. I want to keep you from putting your hand on a hot stove because it's going to burn and it's going to hurt. The best thing I can do is to talk to you about those threats and instill fear. However, when I want to motivate you to do something, like put money in a savings account, or wash your hands before and after you see a patient, the best way to encourage action is to come to you with some kind of reward. Now let's talk about why that is. So when I talk about threats and fear, and I put that threat or I put that fear in your mind, it triggers a stress response. And we've seen this in brain scans. It doesn't have to be a fear of dying. It doesn't have to be a fear of serious injury. Any form of fear triggers those stress regions of your brain, and it's all akin to that kind of fight or flight. We've heard that talked about. I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with that concept. The fact here is, our natural reaction is to avoid those sources of threat. So when we are presented with something that's scary, that's causing us fear, our natural reaction is we're going to stay away from that. So we're going to look for ways to move away. So if we think about the lake example, for instance, you tell me I'm going to drown because I don't know how to swim, my natural reaction is I'm going to stay away from the lake. You tell me I'm going to burn my hand on that hot stove, my natural reaction is I'm going to stay away from the stove. That fear, that stress, it causes me to stay away. It causes me to avoid that thing that's causing that fear, that stress. Now, what we see is there's an issue here with how do I associate that fear? What was the input that created that fear? So when we use fear to motivate somebody into not doing something, which sounds weird, motivate you to not do something, we have to be careful because we run the danger that that fear that they're feeling is going to get associated with us rather than that thing that we're telling them to be afraid of. We'll come back to that later. But let's talk about rewards. What's different when we offer up a reward? Well, first of all, like I said, this is a thing that's going to encourage them to take action. The reason being, we've been conditioned through our lives that we need to undergo an action in order to earn a reward. That's a pretty typical thing. If you want to be successful, you got to work hard. if you want this thing, you got to save money for it. That's how we function as human beings. When we sense the opportunity for a reward that we want, our brain literally initiates a call to action. And when we're successful in achieving that reward, there's a dopamine release. Anybody who's studied anything with dopamine, you understand how addictive dopamine can actually be. All those drugs that people are getting addicted to, it's because they're releasing dopamine. So this is why reward is so much more effective than going out there and trying to put a bunch of fear in people's minds. So we can turn that to the business world. We think about security, we think about FUD, we think about fear, and you look at that and you're like, okay, so if I'm trying to encourage my executives to invest a bunch of money, millions and millions of dollars in this new vulnerability scanner that's going to hopefully fix a lot of our problems, and I go in there with fear, uncertainty, doubt, I'm not motivating them to do anything. I'm motivating them to stay away from me. Worse yet, they may associate that fear that they feel when I tell them how scary hackers are. They very well may associate that to me. And now they don't want me in their meetings. They don't want to hear from me. And we see this right now, today. If you go out and you study how boards, how executives view the CISO role, there was a study done in the UK not too long ago. And the number one answers for how they were viewed was they were the bad news guys. They were the ones that, were always doom and gloom. That's a problem. They avoid us. They don't want to hear from us because all we do when we walk in that room is we scare them. So if I'm going to present to executives, there's an important thing. The FUD wasn't the only issue, right? When I walked in there, I didn't really understand who my audience was. I didn't understand how to talk to these people. I walked into that room, I had all these numbers, I had all the technical details of, network segments and capacity and all these wonderful things. But when I'm looking at different layers of management, I need to understand what is the message that I'm going to put out there that's going to resonate with them. Now, we can simplify this, and we like to keep things simple. It's a 50-minute talk. I don't want to get too deep into this anyway. But if I break down management into really 4 structures, 4 different audiences you want to be aware of, and you may not always be presenting to all of these. Obviously, we start at the top, the board of directors, right? And I'm sorry, this is probably a little small, but you'll catch on. Board of directors, they sit at the top of our organization. Of course, their view is the entire organization. And they have a very high-level view. Underneath them, we've got our executives. And when we talk to executives, they've got a high-level view too. But they're already feeling the pressure of the board above them, and they're feeling the pressure of trying to run a massive business. Underneath them, senior management. Now we're talking, so our executives, we're talking, C-suite, maybe our EVPs, our SVPs. Now we're down to senior management, maybe those VPs and directors. Then we've got our managers, right? These are the folks who are kind of on the front line. So what motivates these guys? How do we talk to them and make sure that we get what we want out of these varying levels and make sure that our message is being targeted to the right audience? Well, let's start with those managers. Many of you may know this already. Maybe you don't. But managers are they're focused on that tactical. They're the ones that are going to want to hear the technical details of how did each one of those solutions score? Which one gives us the best reporting? Which one gives us whatever? What are the criteria that won us over? They're also the ones that are going to be the most budget conscious, as far as they're given a very limited budget that they have very little control over. So they have to figure out how to spend that money. And oftentimes, they don't have the ability to, by themselves, invest in large projects. In fact, most of the time they don't. So they need that technical understanding, but at the end of the day, we have to remember they're the ones we want to talk to when we're trying to address some type of operational concern. That's the message we bring to them. Hey, we can, we can hit more servers if we install 3 new appliances in these locations. That's what they want to hear. When we start moving up the chain and we get to senior management, that starts to shift. Senior management, now we're starting to focus on more strategy. I don't need to know about an individual data center that we can't scan. Instead, I want to know, what is our strategy for security? How does investing $5 million in a new vulnerability scanning infrastructure help us address our overall security strategy? These guys are starting to worry about financial performance now. They're the ones that usually have a P&L attached to them, or they have some type of expense budget that they've got to operate within. And so these are the guys that they're going to have a lot of questions around the cost. They're the ones that start talking about things like return on investment, and we'll talk later about why that is a horrible term to use in the security space. Anybody who follows Bruce Schneier's blog, you've probably read a blog that he has where he talks about exactly that as well. But they're the ones that are going to ask those types of questions. They want to understand, I'm pouring this much money into this, what's it doing for me? And these are the guys where now when we can talk about business efficiencies, they're interested. Yeah, managers like to hear that too because they've got limited resources, but it's when you start to get to the senior levels of management that now that higher thought process of business efficiency across the board starts to come into play, and these are the people we want to address those types of arguments to. When we move up to our executives now, so now we're in the C-suite, now we're talking to those EVPs and SVPs. It gets more high level, less technical, you all know this. But now that strategy that we're talking about, it's no longer our security strategy. Now they're talking about our business strategy. What are we doing? How does security fit into our overall business strategy? Sure, you're going to have a CISO there, hopefully. Nowadays, we're getting more and more of those who may be worried about security. If not, it's going to be the CIO. Yeah, CEOs know about security, but they're always thinking about it in terms of a business context. How do we keep our name out of the news or things like that you guys hear out there? That's where they're focused. These are the guys who want to see innovative ideas. They want to see big ideas. If you're going to launch a new vulnerability scanning platform, what does that give us in ways that we can do something new and innovative as a result? These are the guys that worry about our market performance. How are we doing in this space? What are our competitors doing? Are our competitors doing vulnerability scanning? Who are they investing in? Are they finding their vulnerabilities? Are we less secure than they are? Are we more likely to get hacked than they are? These are the guys asking those questions. This is also where the buck stops when we talk about managing risk. So, in the security space, especially when I'm talking to a bunch of hackers like me, risk, that word, kind of makes a lot of us shudder because we start thinking about risk management and compliance and all these things, but those are important concepts that obviously we have an input into, and we can use that to our advantage. These are the people who need to hear that message because honestly, when all is said and done, they're the ones on the hook for it. And finally, it's the executive level where business growth becomes crucial. That's their job, is to grow the business. They're not there to make sure the business is the most secure thing in the world. Yes, that's a CISO's role, I agree. But even with the CISO, the reason they exist is to enable that business to continue to grow. That's their job. So know that in the back of your head. This is what we call empathy or emotional intelligence. It's understanding these people I'm about to talk to have these motivations, and how am I going to use that to manipulate their response. And then finally, when we get to the board of directors, these guys, if you've never sat in a board meeting before, it is a completely different experience than anything you've ever seen at any other business level. The way that these men and women think is actually quite impressive. But they're thinking in terms of market innovation. They're not talking about even innovation within the organization. They want to see ideas that's going to change the market for that business. So if I'm in retail sales, what am I going to do that's going to take on Amazon and put me ahead of the pack and do something that no one's ever done before. That's what the board of directors want to hear. They want to be out there leading the market space with something so new and different, something that's going to capture the eye of the media. They're also, of course, worried about stock performance. First of all, most of them are probably shareholders. More importantly, they're responsible to the shareholders. That's their job. That's why the board of directors exists. They're there to make sure that business runs, and at the end of the day, they're accountable to the shareholders to make sure the business is running ethically, that it's running sufficiently and successfully. Because of this, they're looking at long-term factors, long-term strategy, 3, 5, 7 years out sometimes. It's funny because a lot of those board members won't be there for 7 years. But yet that's what they're looking at because that is what the shareholders are expecting them to have a plan for. So if I'm going to go to a board of directors meeting and I'm going to talk to them about security, I need to be thinking at that level as well. So I mentioned before the idea of ROI. ROI does not exist in the security space, in my opinion, and I'm not alone in that. I mentioned Bruce Schneier before. He's got an epic blog about it. How many in here have ever heard of the idea of annualized loss expectancy? That's actually not bad. That's a little less than 50%. That's good. I don't see that all the time in the security world. A lot of people, you don't hear this term until you get into higher levels of management, and that's a shame. Because as security consultants or as security professionals within an organization, this is something we need to be aware of. Now, there's good and bad with this, right? So annualized loss expectancy is literally, how do I quantify the risk to the business? How do I put it in terms of dollars and cents? The risk that we face from security issues. Two components to this. The first one's kind of easy. It's the idea of single loss expectancy. So if I have one incident, how much money is that going to cost me? Now, we can pull in a lot of factors here. Certainly, there's a lot of information in the media today about the average cost of a breach. Okay, cool, I can work from that. I can start to pull that in, that's pretty simple. I can also look at the value that a particular business line has to my business, and I can start to pull numbers from there. I can look at the costs of cyber insurance, I can look at the costs of incident response retainers that we have, I can look at those rates and how long I expect. We can do a lot of analysis here. The fact is there's a lot of numbers to work with. So single loss expectancy is pretty easy to put together. This is the one where we fall down. Annual rate of occurrence. How often are we going to get hacked? Try to put that in a number for a minute. How are you going to express that? How do you go before your board and say, this is how often we're going to get hacked? But if I install this whiz-bang new Blinky Box thing that, Rapid7 or Optiv or, company du jour says we need, it's going to now become this? Anybody out there really confident saying, yeah, that our ARO is going to go from this to this if we install this new device? Of course not. We know better. The problem with this idea of ARO in particular is that it doesn't account for those heavy-duty, wide-scale, very innovative attacks that we see. And it doesn't account for emerging threats. There's no way that we've found so far to pull those in. So while ALE, this annualized loss expectancy, is something we need to be aware of and be able to speak to, because you're going to get asked about it when you talk to executive levels of management for sure, don't rely on this because it's incredibly difficult to calculate anything that's going to be accurate. At the end of the day, it's a swag. That's my wild ass guess. So let's do better. If I'm going to pitch an idea for a security initiative, whether it's installing next-gen endpoint software, whether it's expanding the role of our penetration testing, we want to get into purple teaming, or we're going to do threat hunting,
and I want to make that effective, how do I tie this back to the business? I need to speak in business terms if I'm going to motivate anyone beyond my management level. If I'm going to senior management, which I probably am because there's probably money that needs their approval, I might be going to executive levels with this. How do we tie it to the business? Well, one good way to do it is we can just start demonstrating efficiency gains, cost savings. A great example I have of this is a customer I work with. By the way, I didn't mention I work for CDW, so you might hear me mention that. I'll tell you more about that later. But customer at CDW who came to us, they wanted to build a business case around installing next-gen endpoint software. I love that term because, of course, everything is next-gen these days, right? With the next-gen software, okay, you guys want new endpoint security software. I get that. What are some, we started digging into what their business problems were. And one of the big ones we saw, now we're talking with their IT department here. Well, let's look at how often you guys are rebuilding PCs and laptops because you're getting malware. Oh yeah, we're doing that quite a bit. We're spending, they were actually able, amazingly, they had the metrics around this. But they didn't connect that, holy crap, I could build a business case with that because next-gen endpoint, in theory, should help me reduce that cost if it does a better job detecting malicious behaviors and malicious malware, et cetera, et cetera. You guys get the idea. So that's an easy way to start to demonstrate to the business now, this isn't about security anymore, this is about I can save you money. Okay, so that's a good start. The problem with this is it can get nebulous and sometimes it's hard to predict how much money it's really going to save. That example I told you about, that was probably their biggest challenge was, okay, we know what you're doing now in terms of having to rebuild PCs, but what's that going to shrink to? Yeah, that's a harder thing to predict. So, let's get a little bit better. How can we take what we expect in cost savings or some other factor of that initiative and how is it going to allow us to tackle a wish list item? Anybody who's worked with an IT department, you know there's always that wish list of things that's just not getting done. Projects that we know we want to do that are sitting there in a queue, they're too expensive, we don't have enough people, whatever. Go pick one of those off the list. And don't make it an IT project. Make it a business project. Is there something out there, some new functionality we're trying to build, some new platform we want to launch, something like that, something that's been sitting there that we haven't been able to touch because we don't have the resources, we don't have the money, we don't have whatever. Tie that back to your security initiative. Now you've got senior levels of management who are interested in efficiencies looking at that and saying, that's a really neat idea. We could actually do that. If I invest money here, I'm going to get this thing and along with it. Well, that's interesting. Your executives start to perk up too. They're hearing that message and they start to think, there might be some new revenue in that if I can launch that, so maybe I don't tie a direct ROI because we don't like that term in security, but maybe there's some revenue I can tie to this investment that I'm putting forward. The best, however, is when you can sit down and you can find a way that you're going to enable a new innovation or a new business model or a new revenue stream entirely by your security initiative. My favorite example here is an organization I worked with a long time ago, not that long ago, but they were responsible for intellectual property management. So literally people who were working on patents and things like that would store that information with them, and they had all sorts of services wrapped around it, as you can imagine. Well, they were doing this move to cloud, because everybody loves the cloud. Hey, cloud. Great. But the problem they had with it was they had one specific compliance requirement around how they stored specific IP data. And they simply, the way they looked at it was, it ultimately came down, I don't want to get into the specifics, but it came down to how they identified users and auditability. So they were afraid to move into the cloud because, well, we're not going to have that visibility. We're not going to be able to control users. We don't have privileged access management in the cloud environment, so we're going to keep that here. Well, they were trying to move forward some of those initiatives internally and having trouble building the business case. So all we did was we said, well, let's talk about how we could leverage a cloud access broker solution, toss that in with what you're already proposing from MFA and from identity access management and the privileged access management piece that you're implementing internally. How can we tie all that together now that we've got a CASB solution in your cloud and build that out? Now could you move that information? Yeah, you could. Okay, you meet the compliance requirements. Well, now if that's in the cloud, doesn't getting that into the cloud allow you to now create a new service by which people who are supposed to be able to access that highly protected information and today have to go through a manual request process to receive it, could now have a subscription service to be able to go out and access it themselves? Done. They built the business case, it went to the board was excited, the board put out a press release 2 weeks later that this was what they were going to do. That's impressive. That's how you get the board to listen. That was innovative, it put them out there ahead of all their competitors. Nobody else in the marketplace would dare even touch that idea because nobody else had thought through how to achieve what they needed to from a security perspective. Everybody assumed that these compliance requirements that they were subject to would prevent them from getting there. I said audience participation, I've got more. So it's your turn. Who's willing to throw out an idea, something you're trying to do at work right now, a security initiative, and let's talk it through, if you're willing. I don't want you exposing confidential information, obviously. We have an idea. Some security initiative you want to do in the next year.
Better visibility.
Better visibility. Okay, so what are we proposing to get that better visibility?
Strong security onion, something that interacts with all of our event investors.
Okay, so basically you're trying to take that mess that is maybe a SIM today and be able to throw some intelligence around that. We've heard things, we've heard topics like SOAR and yada yada that are all going to make life 100% better there, right? They're going to fix all the problems. Splunk's going to fix all your problems. So let's start with the good. How do you save money there? How is that security initiative going to save money? Come on, this is the easy one.
The faster you detect, the faster you can remediate.
Faster you detect, the faster you remediate. What else? What about the fact that, hey, I've got a bunch of people watching screens today and I can automate like half of what they're doing and enable them to do other work instead? Isn't that a cost savings? Yeah. So let's start thinking about that in those terms. How can we talk about business enablement? Well, obviously, if I'm freeing up those people, they're going to be able to do other projects. So that gets us our better. But what can we do that might be innovative? Now that I've got this new event management platform, I've got better visibility into security events. What can I do that would stand out? Might that enable me to get into things? Maybe there's a play for, and it obviously it depends, and I know this is tough because we don't know the business, right? Maybe there's a play, something we're looking to do with, I'm going to say it, it's a buzzword, you're going to hate me, blockchain. Right? We're afraid to use blockchain for this part of our business for whatever reason. Or we're afraid to start accepting cryptocurrencies because of whatever reason. Maybe as we start to enable that and we have more confidence in our automated visibility into things and we're doing that event management, maybe now I'm a little more gutsy and we start to do things that wake up the market and show that we're innovators. That's what we're talking about doing here. So the last piece I'm going to talk to you about then, I just want to touch on quickly, is when we take this to executives. When you go to executives and when you go to the board, I mentioned board meetings are like nothing you've ever done before. If you're going into a board meeting, step one, You're not presenting. This is not a 30-minute PowerPoint. You're going to stand there and present to them. They're going to clap at the end, and then you're going to answer questions. I tell most people when I'm coaching CISOs, you've got to be prepared to get everything out of your mouth that you want to get out that's most important in about 3 minutes, because that's what you're going to get. Because the next thing that you need to be prepared for is the Kanye Wests in the room. You will get interrupted the entire time. And if you're not prepared for that, it's a frustrating experience. You're going to feel attacked. You're going to feel brutalized. You need to be ready for that. And then finally, be ready for those questions. They're going to ask them. That's how they're going to interrupt you. And they are going to ask you very good questions. At that level, they're used to digging in quick, getting to the answers they need, and they're not waiting for anybody. So anticipate what they're going to ask you. Talk to your mentors. Hopefully you have mentors above you in the organization you can talk to about, hey, what are they going to want to hear from me? And go in there ready to answer their questions. That, with that positive message, is how you're going to be successful. So finally, I'm going to leave you with a quote. Nobody can motivate themselves in a positive direction by continually using negative words. That's what we've talked about here today. So my challenge to you is this. You're going to hear a lot of messages today. You're going to hear all about pen testing tactics from Jordan. Think about what that means in terms of your business and how you would describe that to your higher ups. You're going to hear about automating blue team activities. How do you sell that automation to your senior levels of management? Think about that today when you're hearing those messages. I mentioned mentoring before, having a mentor. So think about that when you see the panel later that's going to go through that discussion. Where do you have that opportunity to further your career by finding mentors within your organization? And then we're going to get all sorts of stuff into malware and host discovery and IPv6. And again, think about how that you're going to sell those activities when you've got to take that to your executive managers. Why is that so important? And then finally, we've got a number of presentations talking about crypto mining, cryptojacking. How do you explain to a business leader why that's important? Think about those today as you go through. Last thing, a couple references for you. I'll leave this up here quickly if you want to get cell phones out if you're interested. A couple of the articles that I used for this. One is that study that I told you about at the hospital. There's some other stuff in here on the neuroscience side. And then finally, I'd love to keep the discussion going. So please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. Twitter is by far the easiest. My handle is up here. My website's up there. LinkedIn, of course, I think we all kind of, if you want to find a job, that's always the easiest way. So with that, thank you all so very much. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the day.